But connection at its core is just so simple. It's paying attention to the person in front of you. It's asking one more question, getting curious, listening a little bit longer, and giving someone a moment where they feel like they matter. And I'll tell you this, it's some of the most meaningful moments in people's careers, I believe, didn't come from a big promotion or performance review. They just came from a moment where someone simply said, "Hey, do you have a minute?" And sometimes that connection starts with something so small. There's a gentleman that I know, and he's just got this great heart. And he posed such a powerful question to me. And he's like, "Hey, how's your heart today?" And I'm like, what? And the way that it was framed made me pause for a moment. And he was truly asking, how are you showing up today? How are you truly? And I wish more people took the time to even ask that question specifically. And I told him I was going to borrow it from him.
Your business's success depends on relationships. Relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Ponto. Each week I bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week I'm excited to connect with J. Israel Greene. He is a distinguished DEI strategist and certified diversity executive, a sought-after international keynote speaker, and a seasoned leadership trainer and coach. His unwavering passion lies in empowering leaders to champion diversity, advance inclusion, and facilitate equitable opportunities that drive profound transformation within their organizations. In his role as the visionary founder and CEO of Mosaic Works, Greene is dedicated to aiding companies in dismantling resistance and fostering inclusive cultures. He also serves as a senior consultant with Envisioning Equity and actively contributes to the impactful A World Without Suicide initiative. His expertise has earned him prestigious recognition, including being named among the top 5 speakers to watch by the Times of New York and ranking as one of the top 10 trending DEI training experts by All American Entertainment. Israel stands out as one of the select few international ISO 30415 standard bearers for diversity and inclusion. Complementing his accolades, he holds certifications from the John Maxwell team and is a certified international DISC and EQ practitioner. With over 2 decades of leadership experience, Israel has navigated diverse corporate landscapes from startups to Fortune 500 companies. His exceptional track record includes a pivotal role as global director for a leading e-commerce consultancy, where he expertly led cross-functional teams spanning North America and Europe. Congrats on your impact with Mosaic Works and all those other things, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Thank you. Excited to be here with you.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on the show to talk about the one really important of all these things that kind of ties all together is that sense of connection and how people can build these relationships across borders, across diversity kind of gaps and things that people often see as dividers. And there's a real need more than ever for people to build stronger connections in it. Before we recorded, you mentioned you have an 8-minute connection masterclass framework that I'd love to hear more about and how people can use it to build stronger relationships within their teams and with their clients and their communities.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny. The 8-minute framework. It's actually a keynote that we give at conferences, and it's called "Do You Have 8 Minutes? The Power of Connection in a Disconnected World." And I got the idea. I was watching Simon Sinek podcast or episode or something, and it came from something that I kept noticing in organizations and honestly in life, really. And it was people are exhausted, they're overwhelmed, they're moving fast, and they just do not take time to slow down. And at the exact same time, people are incredibly hungry to be seen in those moments. And what I realized is that the most of the time connection doesn't necessarily fail because people don't care. It typically fails because people feel like they don't have time. And everyone's rushing, you have someone at a company, they're moving at neck break speed, and, they're going to the next meeting, the next email, the next deadline. So the question I started asking leaders and teams is a very simple one. And it's, hey, do you have 8 minutes? Not an hour, not a retreat, not a leadership seminar, not 10 minutes. It's just 8 minutes of real attention. There's no phone, no multitasking. There's no, I'm listening while I'm answering emails or anything like that. It's just truly 8 minutes where someone feels like they matter. And what's amazing is how powerful that small moment can be. And I've seen someone walk into a conversation frustrated, being defensive, ready for an argument. And 8 minutes later, they're saying something like, you know what, thanks for taking time out and actually listening to me. And when that moment happens, there is something beautiful that shifts in that moment. And walls come down, excuse me, walls come down, and trust begins to grow and those real conversations start to happen. So when I talk about the power of connection in a disconnected world, what I'm really saying is connection doesn't necessarily always require huge investment of time, which we think it does. So we always say, well, I just don't have time. Sometimes it just requires the willingness to pause, to look someone in the eye and say, you know what? Hey, you have 8 minutes. And in today's world, that small moment can be surprisingly powerful. And one of the things that I did to make it even easier for people to do this is I put it into a framework. One of the things I say a lot is that connection isn't about having more time. It's about being more present with the time we already have. And the framework, is basically it's a 8 minute connection framework, and it's notice, be present, and be responsible for showing up. And when you're able to do that, you're going to see a unique thing happen in that relationship. So notice, be present, and respond.
Yeah, I love that reframe and the dispelling the myth that you have to invest a huge amount of time all at once to build relationships, when the reality of it with any relationship, whether it's a professional or personal, or I guess inside or outside of work, because they're all the same sort of relationships, but it's all the little moments, the little connections, the little gestures compounded over time that equal a relationship. It's not one big sweeping gesture that happens once and then is never repeated again and never followed up with.
Yep.
That's not a relationship. That's just a fluke. And but I think people, when it comes to business relationships or relationships in a business setting, that people's mindset is that you have to do these big initiatives and it's going to be because it's a huge problem. It requires this big, equally big response, when in reality, it's about building these little habits and these little check-ins and these micro moments almost, that when you add it all up, creates the relationship. And it's those little, like you said, you have 8 minutes to chat, and it's making sure people feel seen and you're not distracted and you're actually making eye contact and showing you're listening, and then not just hearing what they're saying, but actually acting on it and showing that you value what they're saying. Because it's one thing to listen and show them that you heard them, but if you still don't act on it or don't show that, like say, you don't care what they had to say, that doesn't really help build the relationship. It's more about just going through the motions at that point. So all those little things compounded over time lead to having a good relationship or a good business culture or a strong team dynamic, all the things that companies are lacking and people are really looking for. But it's not just about the grand sweeping gestures that actually build that sort of trust and connection. It's the 10 or even just 8 minutes at the beginning of a meeting, or just little check-in calls where you're not also doing an email and you're not just uh-huh-ing your way through the conversation.
Yeah. And, connection isn't complicated. Like you just mentioned, sometimes people hear this word connection and they suddenly think that it's this complicated leadership competency. And like they need to go to this 3-day session or seminar and come back with this big, thick binder and they've got all this work to do. And listen, I do workshops. I appreciate the business of workshops as well. But connection at its core is just so simple. It's paying attention to the person in front of you. It's asking one more question, getting curious, listening a little bit longer, and giving someone a moment where they feel like they matter. And I'll tell you this, it's some of the most meaningful moments in people's careers, I believe, didn't come from a big promotion or performance review. They just came from a moment where someone simply said, "Hey, do you have a minute?" And sometimes that connection starts with something so small. There's a gentleman that I know, and he's just got this great heart. And he posed such a powerful question to me. And he's like, "Hey, how's your heart today?" And I'm like, what? And the way that it was framed made me pause for a moment. And he was truly asking, how are you showing up today? How are you truly? And I wish more people took the time to even ask that question specifically. And I told him I was going to borrow it from him, and start using it. So I've been using that as well. Just, how's your heart today?
Yeah, I like that because everyone's so used to the "how are you?" Fine, and then you just move on, and no one's ever fine. Like fine is probably the most commonly used lie in the world is "how you doing?" Fine, I'm okay.
Yep.
Everyone struggles with something. Everyone's worried about something. Everyone has something on their mind that is they would rather have off their plate. They would want to be over that challenge, and so reframing that to "how's your heart today" is, I think, is an elegant solution because it does breaks them out of that standard greeting reply and this kind of the platitude, and they really get to a deeper conversation. And it's a similar sort of mindset as well. Like you ask one more question, and just showing you're really interested in people, and then the when you're showing those little gestures, or just like one of my favorite things to do for these little moments is just compliment someone on the way they showed up. Not something that's about like their physical body, but like where they're like what they're wearing, or something like they styled their hair, or like something their way they're carrying themselves. Something that just shows like, hey, I'm seeing you, and you're
Yep.
having an impact on me because of how you chose to show up today. Those little things you don't seem super consequential, but you can have a huge impact on the rest of their day because they're now feeling better about themselves, or they're out of a little funk, or they might have been on the edge of spiraling because of some other stressful stuff that they're dealing with that they're masking really well. But the little recognition and being seen can turn that around. And it's, again, when you think of it just like a one of event, it doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal. But if everyone in your team is doing these little things regularly, that's a lot of additions to kind of the relationship bank account that allows it to compound and really have a big impact over time.
Mhm. Absolutely agree with you.
So when you're working with people, obviously they have that initial, "oh my gosh, this is going to take a whole lot of work and we don't have the time or the budget for it." But when they finally realize, okay, we can break this down into smaller steps, and what's kind of like the first place you recommend they start working? And what are some like a success story you've seen of people actually implementing this? Because it's one thing to realize, oh my gosh, there's this huge problem, but then seeing what's the light at the end of the tunnel is also really helpful in making that first step.
Yeah, one of the simplest pieces for me is to be in the moment, to slow down, and like you said, notice. You just mentioned noticing the way that people show up, and not necessarily physically by what they have on, or the way their hair is done, but just kind of how they're showing up. And when you're in that moment and you're able to slow down enough to pause and have that conversation, it's all of a sudden the the energy is going to shift for you. And once that happens, you're going to discover it's like, okay, wait, this person either isn't as bad as I thought they were, or or maybe they're more interesting than I thought they were, something of that nature. A lesson that has really helped me and come across for me is, it's taught me that people are usually carrying more than we realize. So when you're stopping, you're present in that moment, and you understand what's going on, and you take notice of those little small things. When someone is short with you, maybe when someone seems disengaged, or when someone shuts down. And typically we're moving and we're in our own world and we don't even notice any of this stuff. So we're just kind of walking, and all of a sudden, wait, this person didn't speak and their head was down. Typically, they're beaming with light. It's so easy to assume the worst, but most of the time there is a story there that we don't know yet. And I try to remind leaders, especially that I coach, that typically the story you're telling yourself about the person might not be the real story. And connection invites us to be able to slow down long enough to be able to discover what that truth may be. And when we do, we often find compassion where we expected conflict or disagreement or something of that nature. So being present in the moment and slowing down is the first thing that someone can do, and really just kind of taking stock of what's around you, so to speak.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, because when you feel our brains are, we don't like not knowing. And so the first thing our brains do is trying to assume or fill in all these answers based on assumptions and things that we guess. And it's never the whole picture of that accurate of what's going on. There's just no way you can assume all the correct answer for why someone's feeling the way they are or why something seems off. And but then when you have these assumptions, you're acting on them, you're treating them differently because of things that you assumed, instead of asking them what was wrong and listening to them and learning the real answer for what's going on. And that over time just erodes and kills the team and the relationship, because you're acting off of what you assume is the right answer, but it's obviously not. And then I also like how you, when you're that people think, oh my gosh, we gotta keep moving quicker and quicker. We can't slow down. We can't slow down. We're gonna miss things. But the reality is, if you keep going that fast and you don't take time to slow down and connect, then stuff's gonna start falling off. It's like the race car, the NASCAR. If you don't do the pit stops and change the tires and get more fuel and rest and replenish, you're not going to finish the race. You're going to crash up because something's going to fall apart and stop working. And so even though you think, oh, slowing down seems like the anathema to the business mindset these days, it's actually the cure for what ails so many teams, because we're not wired, our brains can't handle going this fast for this long.
Mm-hmm.
And you need that rest, and your teams need the rest. And the teams that are able to take the time to rest and connect will go further, faster, and for a lot longer than the ones that are just trying to go without any rest or recharge, and end up burning out and failing because they're not listening to their bodies themselves and their team members. It just, that mindset of always going faster, it does not work.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I love the analogy about the race car, because we definitely have to have our pit stops and be able to replenish and make sure that we are refueling ourselves.
So when from a leadership standpoint, what is some of the ways you see that they can start kind of pumping the brakes a little bit, so to speak, to try and slow things down? Is there are some implementation tools or like some ways they can start to affect that change in their team to avoid the burnout and the crash that's coming?
Yeah, I believe there are a couple of things that I always say. Two of the most powerful, and the more that I do this work, the more I'm convinced of it. Two of the most powerful resources that a leader has in their tool belt is, one, vulnerability, and two, connection. And leaders, they have to understand that they set the emotional temperature of the room. So understanding that first and foremost, whether they realize it or not, people are constantly watching the leaders for their signals. What are they doing? What are they saying? Are they walking the grid that they're talking? Is it safe to speak up here? Is it okay to disagree? Do people matter here, or is it just about the results? And what I've noticed is that leaders often underestimate the power of those small moments, like I mentioned before. And we think that culture gets built through the big speeches, the big initiatives, but it's those tiny interactions. So making space for those interactions, a leader asking in a meeting could be something as simple as, how are you really doing? How's everyone showing up today on a scale of 1 to 10? And actually wait for the answer. It could be a leader saying, I might be wrong here, but can you help me, Carl, what might I be missing here? And those moments are going to tell people more about the culture than any mission statement on the wall ever will. So that's creating the space for it and making sure that we are equipped. And I wish more companies did this. There's a trust. I don't know if you saw it online, but I did this post about this trust barometer, and it was talking about how employees, they just don't trust the people they're working for, and as a result of that, resistance is being increased, and leaders have to be equipped to be able to have those difficult conversations, and be able to stay connected when there are those disagreements. So we have to stop pretending that the disagreements is the problem itself. Disagreement is normal. It's the real issue is how we handle it in those moments. And one of the practices I talk about is replacing judgment with curiosity. So instead of saying, I can't believe, Carl, you think that way. Oh my goodness, and try asking, hey, can you help me better understand, how you got to that point? What was it about your experience that brought you there? And it sounds simple, but the question can completely change the tone of the conversation. And what happens is when people feel attacked, they defend. When people feel misunderstood, or when people feel understood, they begin to open up. And sometimes what you discover is that the distance between you and the other person, it wasn't nearly as big as you thought. But you have to be equipped and have the courage to lean into those tough conversations when you find that moment of opportunity and not shy away from it, which is typically what most people do. So I wish we were equipping leaders. So at the top, equip your leaders to have those tough conversations. And then also making sure that you're creating space for them when that's happening.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Israel. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. If you want to connect with myself or Israel, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.